Welcome. Wait.
Yes, but I'll let you know when to start.
Okay.
You're live now on Facebook.
Okay.
Hi, Facebook. We'll be getting started in just a moment.
Okay.
Hey, Facebook viewers, we're going to get started in just a moment. So bear with us. We're getting started, just getting a few things settled, and we'll be getting started in just a moment.
Okay. We will be getting started, everyone. Welcome to all of our participants, attendees on Facebook Live, and welcome to all those that are joining on Zoom. We will be getting started in 3 minutes. We are just getting everything set up. We're glad you could join us tonight for the Town Hall Coping with Remote Learning. We will be getting started in 2 minutes. I see people are still joining. Welcome, everyone. Facebook Live at St. Paul's Baptist Church in Westchester and Love and Basketball Ministries, and everyone who's joining here on Zoom. Thank you for attending tonight. I will be turning over to Miss Aquila Wells in about a minute and a half. And for those of you that are on Facebook, feel free to share this town hall with Coping with Remote Learning. We are excited about our conversation and discussion tonight. Dr. Carmen, Lesesne, and I. Welcome, everyone, to the Town Hall Coping with Remote Learning. I will now turn it over to Miss Aquila Wells.
Good evening, everyone. In behalf of the Relaunch and Health and Wellness Ministry of St. Paul's Baptist Church, I too welcome you to our town hall, Coping with Remote Learning. Our facilitator and co-presenter this evening is Dr. Taunya Tinsley. Dr. Tinsley is the owner of Transition Counseling Services and Life Skills Program that includes a ministry division, Love and Basketball Ministry, where she provides individual, marriage, family, and group counseling and consultative services. She is both a licensed professional counselor and national certified counselor. Additionally, Dr. Tinsley is a facilitator with the New Paradigm Ministry Leadership Training as part of the Ephesus Project and the clinical director of the Mount Eric Baptist Church Counseling Center in Pittsburgh. She has a wealth of experience providing appropriate personal and academic growth opportunities for those seeking to become professional master's degree level counselors. Dr. Tinsley helps professionals seeking advanced or specialty areas of training and development in multicultural and social justice issues, as well as spiritual, Christian interventions, and sports counseling development. She has also managed to stay active in both the workplace and in the community, advocating for and promoting organizations, helping professionals and their clients. She served as the North Atlantic Regional Representative for the Association for Multicultural Counseling and Development, the President of the Pennsylvania College Counseling Association, and the President of the Pennsylvania Counseling Association. Dr. Tinsley graduated from Duquesne University with a PhD in Counseling, Education, and Supervision. She earned her Doctorate of Ministry with a focus in prophetic congregation development using 21st century methods. Dr. Tinsley was an associate professor in the Department of Counseling Education and program coordinator at California University of Pennsylvania. She has also served as the director of graduate programs in counseling at both Waynesburg University and Mission Seminary, as well as an assistant teaching professor in the Education and Counseling Department at Villanova University. Welcome, Dr. Tinsley.
Thank you, Ms. Aquila, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you once again for inviting me to participate and assist with this town hall this evening. I'm really excited with my co-presenter this evening, Dr. Carmen J. Lesesne. And I just want to tell you all a little bit about her. Her purpose in life is to facilitate growth. This purpose manifests and evolves through the various ways in which she serves. Her progression as an educator includes teaching in the city, counseling in the suburbs, leading teams of educators in her hometown district, preparing those entering the teaching profession, and currently leading a team of dedicated high school staff members in the middle of a pandemic. Dr. Carmen's passion is racial equity, an area in which she coaches professionals across the nation. In addition, as the owner of Fab Five Gyms and leader of Balanced Bosses, she guides other business owners by sharing resources and knowledge. Furthermore, Dr. Carmen is working to secure her real estate license to help others use real estate to build and maintain wealth. Yet the greatest example of growth facilitation is in her role as a mom of a sophomore who is attending her alma mater, the Lincoln University. Humbled by the Creator, Carmen Lesesne is grateful for opportunities to grow and help others to do the same. And I am honored and grateful to have her here tonight as we co-present and facilitate this town hall, Coping with Remote Learning. Good evening, Dr. Carmen.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Tinsley. Thank you, Sister Wells, for the invitation. I'm humbled to be here and looking forward to the conversation tonight.
I am going to share our PowerPoint slide and we will get started with our presentation. And I will share what the format is in just 1 second. So tonight, we are here to talk about coping with remote learning. This town hall came out of St. Paul's Baptist Church, the Relaunch Committee, and the Health and Wellness Ministry. There were three concerns that came up, and it was the concerns about the impact of not going back to school and how it's impacting students emotionally and holistically. There's also concerns about the impact of remote learning on parents. And there's concerns about the impact of remote learning on teachers and other support personnel. And for the purpose of this presentation, we define support personnel could be coaches, it could be those in ministry, youth ministry, other church members, community members, mentors, any other staff in the school environment. Our goals for today is that we want to provide a brief presentation from an administrator's perspective. We'll provide a brief presentation from a professional counselor's perspective, and then we are going to open it up for questions and answers. Throughout our presentation, we will have interaction and asking the audience to use the chat boxes, either on Facebook Live or on Zoom, to answer any of the questions that we may pose. Dr. Lesesne and I are coming from a hope-focused, optimistic approach perspective as it relates to coping with remote learning. We know that we are in a crisis, a pandemic, and we know the saying is when there is a crisis, it could be dangerous. But this is also an opportunity for growth. So we will talk about how we can use this opportunity for growth. And although we will not be able to solve all of the problems with remote learning or coping with remote learning in one night in an hour and a half, we want to make sure that we begin the conversation. Our goals are to increase your awareness, increase your knowledge, give you tools and techniques to put into your toolbox. And finally, we just want to make sure that this is a relational, collaborative conversation. So right now, I will turn it over to Dr. Carmen, where she will talk about coping with remote learning from an administrator's perspective. And I would like to also say that although we're coming from different perspectives, both Dr. Carmen and I have administrative experiences in K through 12 and high school or college environments. We both are counselors. We both have been teachers. And so although we're coming from a different perspective, we will be able to kind of empathize with all of the different roles we're talking about tonight. Dr. Carmen.
Thank you. Before we advance to the next slide, I just want to share just a brief story about how I got back into education. I have 20 years experience in education, and there was a period of time where I was focused on my businesses. And actually, when the pandemic hit in March, I knew who was sitting at the table and the types of conversations that they were having, and I missed that. So I wanted to get back into education. At that point, I was traveling the country dealing with racial equity and talking to teachers across the country. So I'm now back in a role, still working my other businesses, but I'm back in the education role and loving it. So one of the things I want you to understand, whether you are a student, a parent, a community member who doesn't always have a peek into school life, please know that the staff members, the teachers, the administrators who are there, who are in school, are there because they want to be there. This year has been unprecedented in so many ways. And even with 20 years of experience, I feel in some cases like a first year administrator, because there are so many things that are coming at us that we have never, ever, ever had to deal with. So just wanted to give you that tidbit of a story. If we could go to the next slide. I'm gonna ask just who's here. So if you are a student, please utilize the chat. If you are new to Zoom, you can just hover your arrow over the bottom part of the screen and a bar will come up. You can click chat and feel free to type in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. If you are a student, please type 1. If you are a parent or guardian, type 2. School staff, type 3. Community member, 4. Or other. If you don't find that you fit into any of those categories, please type 5. And it is quite possible that you are more than one of these at one time. In fact, I'm going to type in 2, 3, and 4. That is my story. So I appreciate that. We just want to see who's in the building. See people who are multiple. We have parents, school staff, and community members. We have parents, community members. So we have a lot of parents in the space. So thank you all for coming. Oh, we have students. Wonderful. Wonderful. We have a great mix of people who are here. If we could go to the next slide, please. There are a series of questions here. I'm going to read them one by one. And if you can relate to this statement that I have said, please just acknowledge it in whatever way that you can. Hit like, make a reaction, put words in the chat. So number 1, I have never experienced schooling in a pandemic. So my answer is going to be 1. Until this year, I've never experienced schooling in a pandemic. The next sentence is, there are many challenges connected to remote learning. If you can connect with that, if you can agree with that, go ahead and type yes. Number 3, this experience has showed me a lot of things that can be done better. I am absolutely going to type yes on that. Number 4, there are some things that I have experienced that I would like to keep even after the pandemic is over. I'm going to type yes to that as well. And then number 5, I am learning to give myself and others around me grace. We're going to spend some time talking about grace tonight from the perspective of remote learning. One of the things that I said to my staff members early on was, there was a level of anxiety that educators were experiencing, that because they wanted to do a good job, but again, they felt like first-year teachers, not really knowing how to maneuver what we were experiencing. Many teachers have multiple ways that they have to instruct students right now. So some have students sitting in front of them. Some are also teaching via technology to students who are at home. And there's even a third program in some schools where students are absolutely asynchronous, where teachers are recording lessons and providing work for students to do at their own pace. That's a lot for a teacher to manage at one time, and learning how to do all of it and wanting to do it well. So one of the things I said to them early on was, listen, we are extending grace to ourselves and to each other. We have to. Otherwise, we're going to drive ourselves crazy. So let's talk about the word grace for a moment. Next slide, please. You can think about it a few different ways. Courteous goodwill, a favor rendered by one who need not do so. So just offering something that I don't have to offer, but wanting to. And then if we're coming from the spiritual perspective, just unmerited mercy and favor that God gave humanity. So all of these things are ways to shape the word and the perspective grace. If we could go to the next slide, please. I'll talk to the parents for a moment. We hope that by the end of this time, we have an opportunity to provide you with some strategies, some skills, some perspectives, hopefully some coping mechanisms that will help you during the pandemic and helping your students, your children to get through and flourish during this period of remote learning. From a parent's perspective, it is important to ground your students, ground them in love, ground them in expectations that you set for them. Even though we're in unprecedented times, I'm certain that as a parent, you have high expectations for them. So you want to ground them in that. Let me just pause for a moment as well. This is very new for me, facilitating workshop via Zoom, similar to teaching, right? So I want to encourage some interaction during this time. So if I say something that connects with you, or that you are actually doing, just type yes. If it is new to you, just a thought you hadn't considered before, just type new. And if it's something that you want to try, even if you are familiar with it, just type try. So 3 words to consider. Yes, like you agree or you've done it. New, like I haven't thought of that before. And try, something that you're willing to do. So at any point, you can type in yes, new, or try. R for parents and guardians, routines. It's very important to set a routine. As unsettling and unprecedented as the times are, the more routine that you can set for the day for your students, especially the little ones, it's very helpful. However, the older ones as well, it's beneficial for them to get up, get dressed, sit at a space where you can learn and start your day, just to get them in a routine. The second one is access. Even though the schools may not be, the buildings may not be open, some schools are open in like a hybrid model, you still have access to all of the resources that you would normally have, even if, when the school was open. You have access to counselors. Many teachers still have time set aside for extra help. Teachers have office hours. So contact the school, utilize the access that you have to still connect with the resources that are available academically, emotionally, community service things that they may be aware of. Whatever you would need to contact the school for, you still can do that. Communication is important. If you notice a change in your child, you are the expert of your children. You know when things are on, when things are off. If you are noticing that they are even more withdrawn, if you are noticing that there's a change in their sleeping patterns or their eating patterns, their mood, these are just things to be aware of, and might be worth mentioning perhaps to the guidance counselor about some things that you have noticed. Communication also, if you have a question, ask. And E, environment. It is important to have a place where students can learn, good lighting, access to materials, quiet if possible. We know everybody's living situation varies, but as much as possible, if there's a quiet space where the student can be to learn, that is important. So that is the grace, parents and guardians, that we want you to extend to yourself and to those around you. Next, please. Students, we are not leaving you out. Again, if this is something that you are doing yourself, go ahead and type yes. If it is new to you, something you haven't thought of, go ahead and type new. And if you are willing to try it, go ahead and type try. Students, I need to say this to you. We are still in school. Even if you are home, you are doing school from home. I know how easy it is to fall into, I am in my bed, I am in my room. It does not feel like school. However, one of the first element for grace for students is goals. Even though it feels different and it looks different, keep your goals beyond school in mind. What do you want to do when you're done? This is for the older students. When you graduate from high school, what is it that you want to do? Now take a step back and consider how this year plays a role into you reaching that goal or not, and then conduct yourself accordingly. And then, so those are more long-term goals, but short-term goals, what do you want this year to feel like, to be like? If you are not excited or happy about what has happened, what goals can you set short-term that you can elicit support from those around you to help you accomplish? Do you want your grades to improve? Do you want to become more involved with some of the things that are happening? So set the goals and work accordingly. R is recognize. Again, recognize we are still in school. We are absolutely still in school. And the other one is to be ready, right? Recognize the importance of staying ready and prepared for class, ready and prepared for the opportunities that are going to come to you. And that is all rooted in how you conduct yourself during this time. A is ask. Again, ask the questions, ask for help, ask for clarity. You can sit through and not understand, but that doesn't benefit you at all. So take the opportunity to ask. And I know it might feel weird to be in Zoom and to get your lessons from Zoom, but send a message in the chat, email the teacher afterwards. The next one is community. It is important as a young person to stay connected in community with your peers, with your teachers, with your family, with your extended family, if you are connected to a church or a mosque or a synagogue, any religious organization, any outside entities that you're a part of. And again, I understand it's difficult in the times that we're in. However, that helps to keep you grounded and focused. And the last one, which is very important, is to engage. And I'm going to put a plug in as an administrator. It is very difficult to teach, to present, to blank squares. So I am encouraging you to engage one way by turning on your camera. As administrators, we do not penalize or require, at least not where I am, to require students to turn their cameras on. However, it just adds to the community, to the classroom. So that is grace that we are asking and hoping that students will extend for themselves and to those around them. Last ones, let's talk about grace for staff members. We as staff members give and give and give, and not always do we take care of ourselves. So a couple of things to consider. One, gauge. Gauge the effectiveness of your instruction. Gauge the emotional well-being of yourself and your students and your colleagues. Just take the temperature on a daily basis. Paying attention to those measurements are important and will help you it will guide how you conduct yourself as you move forward. Reflect. Every day, take an opportunity to reflect. Did I accomplish what I needed to or wanted to today? How do I feel after today? And I'm coming from this perspective for staff members because I know you understand how to plan, you understand how to instruct, even though we're continuing to figure this out now. The basic understanding that you have is there. Very, not too often do we look to take care of ourselves. So this is why I'm coming from this perspective for staff members. A is accept. Accept the things you cannot change. We cannot fix everything. We cannot fix everyone. And accept that things are different. It does not feel the same at all. That's okay. It's just different. So how do we figure it out? How do we do it well? How do we still provide the services to our students that they need? C, connect. So many people are feeling isolated and alone and not connected at all. As a school entity in our classrooms, in our space, we have an opportunity to make those connections with students, with parents, with each other. So we want to make sure that we are staying connected. And then the last one is to encourage. Encourage your students to do the best that they can, which I know that you do. Encourage each other to just stay focused and stay positive. And then encourage yourself every day. This is the grace that we hope that school staff extend to themselves and to others. Next slide, please. At the end of the day, all of this is about taking care of yourself and taking care of each other. I appreciate the opportunity just to share a few different perspectives and a few tools that might be helpful for you. And I look forward to any questions that you may have that we can engage in at the end. Dr. Tinsley?
Thank you, Dr. Carmen. That is a great lead in, and will connect to what I'm going to share, and will add to the toolbox that we wanted to provide, is giving grace, and grace from a student's perspective, from a parent's perspective, and from a school staff. I will now coping with remote learning from a professional counselor's perspective. I can remember exactly last March, it was a Thursday, Governor Tom Wolf had announced that beginning on Friday, we were going into quarantine and social distancing. I was teaching at Villanova University. I had 2 classes that evening, and I didn't even get to the course content Thursday evening. I had to spend time engaging my students with, what does this all mean? It was a shock for everyone. And many students who attend Villanova attend for face-to-face reasons. So this idea of moving class to online remote learning, it was very stressful for many. Many of the students came to campus for their technology, for their computer access. So that became an issue. And so I really had to spend some time, because I was shifting the class over to Zoom, helping students to walk through Zoom. But some of those students didn't even know what Zoom was. And so I really had to meet those students where they were. And I think it's really important to understand that this was new for everyone. For me, I was used to remote learning. I used to work at California University of Pennsylvania. We have 100% online programs. We had standards and competencies to provide high quality, effective programming and good academic rigor. However, I had to take a step back, because not all of my colleagues in the field were trained to teach online. So it was new to them. Everyone was punting. Everyone was trying to figure out what platform we're going to use. And if some of you may remember, last March and April, Zoom shut down because there were so many people trying to access Zoom, which then became very frustrating. So let's just talk about real quick, what is remote learning? Remote learning and remote teaching is using technology, oftentimes using some kind of video platform. There are programs specifically for higher education and K through 12. There's Google Classroom. Some people were using Skype. Some people were using Zoom. And remote learning can be synchronous, where everyone has to log in at the same time and have interaction with the teacher or the professor. Or it could be asynchronous, where somebody's putting up a discussion board, or there is some assignment that the student will independently do on their own. This was all new. People didn't understand. I know when I made the transition at Villanova, I wanted to kind of have some continuity. The students were used to meeting at a certain time. So I continued with asynchronous, and we were meeting all together online. So that was something people had to understand. And when we talk about moving synchronously online for K through 12 students, that's like 6 or 8 hours a day. So when we talk about some of the challenges, it is spending more time at the computer. And it is spending more time offline, trying to complete the assignments, trying to complete the homework. Now, for some of students, this is daunting, especially when they had limited time on the computer. There's online dangers. I know I was working with another colleague, especially for adolescents, is to really understand some of the lurking that can happen online and setting controls for young people being on the computer. Isolation. And here's one of the things that's really important. When we think about individuals across the lifespan from birth to death, high school students are one of the most busiest groups. So to have them go from sports and other extracurriculars and classes and doing all these things to doing nothing and being quarantined at home, that is a shock to their system. It's requiring people to work independently. We as human beings are designed to be relational. So now how can I be relational and have that human connection and attachment via technology? And I think it's really important to understand all of a sudden now, families were all being at home together and everybody had different schedules. So now how do we learn how to cohabitate together 24/7 under the same roof? And then also part of the challenges were tackling new technology and making sure I have the Wi-Fi and the bandwidth, because now we got 5 people under the same roof that have to be working remotely. And what does that mean for my financial aspect now? Because now I got to call Comcast or Verizon and increase that, and that's more money. And we know that there were some issues financially. Some of the benefits of remote learning, I know I was working with some students and they were happy that we went to virtual because they were being bullied. And so that saved some of their anxiety that they were experiencing face-to-face class. So the benefits can be health benefits, or those who are experiencing bullying. There could be flexibility, eliminating the need to travel back and forth to school, personalized learning, and there can be quality student-teacher interaction. And there's some, face-to-face could be more structured and people are used to structured, but a benefit for remote learning is there could be less structure, less pressure for people to focus more. And then I also have to say another challenge that we have heard is racial and ethnic disparities. I have a quote from Spivak and Gallagher. It says, "Early evidence suggests learning losses from the pandemic, though large for all students, will be the largest for those who are Black and brown. This does not reflect a lack of effort on the part of families, but rather a magnification of structural inequities in school quality and home environments baked into our society. The legacy of racism may be more visible during the pandemic, but it operates all the time, making it harder for Black and brown children to succeed in school." So let's talk about the benefits and the challenges of remote learning and what that means. So there's some surveys and there's some questions that have been answered by a variety of people. Last night, I happened to be on Twitter and I saw this tweet from a teacher. She said, "I've been teaching face-to-face all school year, and I'm here to tell you, face-to-face instruction doesn't equal better mental health for students. They are still struggling because it's a pandemic." And then somebody else replied, "I agree. We are full-time face-to-face and full-time virtual because parents got to pick. Kids on both sides are struggling. Teachers are struggling." And I just kind of want to share some other experiences. I've had an opportunity to talk to a group of people and get some feedback from them. And there were kind of 3 main things that was asked. How was the transition to remote learning for you as a student, parent, teacher, or administrator? How is remote and hybrid learning going today? And how are you coping as a student, parent, teacher, or administrator? And any other comments? So let me just share from the group that I interacted with. As a parent of high schoolers, the transition to remote learning wasn't difficult at first because my children are independent learners. This semester, my daughter started math, which is proving to be a challenge, so I have a tutor on standby. Another parent said, initially, the transition was extremely challenging. For one, we thought it was going to be brief. Our home wasn't set up with 3 workstations, nor was our Wi-Fi strong enough for the long-term streaming sessions simultaneously. Additionally, not being able to go anywhere and the interruption of regular activities like workouts and time with friends was very taxing on both of my teenage sons, not to mention the insanity and hysteria around being in the presence of anyone that was constantly being reinforced by the media. As a parent, the transition to remote learning was smoother than I expected. Since my kids are a bit older, it seemed easier for them to conform to the new way of learning. And I think it's really important that there's a continuum of people's experiences. It's not a one size fits all. One student said, as a student, the transition to remote learning was not difficult because I was equipped with the resources to make a successful transition. I had access to adequate technology and Wi-Fi. I also had a quiet space to work in without any children or siblings to take care of. During the first week of the pandemic, some professors were diligent in holding space for the moment of collective trauma that we were experiencing as a nation. I feel that those courses most successfully navigated pandemic learning because teachers were willing to embrace, not resist, the state of flux we were in. Yet for those teachers that did not have a trauma-informed background and were not willing to adapt their teaching and expectations accordingly, the dialogue course material and the courses became tense, unproductive, dating, and exhausting. How is it going right now? Let me share on the western side of the state, at a school district, WPXI News reported Pine Richland senior student surveys reveal heartbreaking responses. And these students were saying, some of the students' responses were, my parents are months behind on rent, and I've been struggling with isolation for almost a year now. A parent said, my kids feel like they haven't learned anything all year. Almost all of the respondents, 83, said they feel disconnected with their peers. 78% had mental health concerns in the past year, isolation, virtual learning, and the loss of extracurricular activities. The fear of COVID, however, was at the bottom of the list. And some of the other responses from Pine Richland, my life was very vague and lonely. I spend a lot of time on my phone with no activities to make me active. It is very hard. We have nothing to look forward to. Losing the ability to participate in extracurricular activities was really upsetting, especially since it was my last year. It's been hard. I have always prided myself on being an active member of the community, and virtual clubs and activities are nowhere near the same as they were before the pandemic. Somebody said, I don't have anything to look forward to and lost my connections to my friends. And then finally, an 8th grade teacher in Boston, he asked his students to reflect on the pandemic. One student said, I lost my ability to be happy. Staying in the house is not for me. Basketball really helped my depression, and I can't play it now. I've lost a lot of interest in my friends. I stick to myself. Another student said, I lost time. I could have been enjoying my childhood. Another one said, I have less motivation for school. Now, one of the things he wanted to find out from the students, do they think that their learning is lost? And they said, I think parents and educators are wrong because we have improved our grades and we try to do as much work as possible. Also, we do learn more things from home because we are more focused. This pandemic is already very stressful for students, and giving us more work won't help. Also, it is very risky since kids can bring back the virus and family members might not have the health care that they need. One student said, I want them to know that some kids may be struggling, but some are having less of a problem with remote learning than others because every person has different experiences with things. And one finally said, they have many opinions talking about parents and educators, but they're not the ones who wake up and get on Zoom every day. And then finally, he asked about students similar to Dr. Carmen, pandemic gains and growth. One student said, I used to feel like I didn't want to do school anymore. This was before the pandemic. And because of the pandemic, I had to think to myself, that's not the path I want to go down. So I started changing and completing more work and focusing on myself instead of other people. Another student said, I'm starting to have more confidence in myself. Another student said, I'm better at managing my time and my schoolwork. I feel more rested. I am better at speaking out a little bit more. I learned about my people and I learned more about what people did to Black people then and now. I also learned to respect people's identity and try to find out my own. I also learned to love myself and to see who are my actual friends during this pandemic. So now, although these are feedback from out there, I'd like to ask you all, use the chat box. How was your transition to remote learning? As a student, teacher, parent, or administrator, how are you coping? And are there any other questions that you might have? So I'll give you a few minutes to put some things in the chat box if you'd like. And please make sure you state if you are a student, teacher, or administrator, or parent. Okay, if anybody has any comments or would like to share, please do at any point. But at least you've kind of heard from other people throughout the state, from people that I have interacted with. I will say that of the people that I've interacted with, they said they're hopeful. This isn't going to last for long. So they're trying to look at it from a hope-focused perspective. So let me just give you a little bit of knowledge about the impact of the pandemic. A quote that I saw, when our youth are frightened, disconnected, grieving, or anxious, they aren't learning. Their brains aren't taking in lessons or holding on to the Common Core standards. Their amygdalas are in charge, and adults just sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. And I think we have to understand, there are some who are frightened. What's going to happen to my family? We have financial situations. Somebody in the family doesn't have a job. They're feeling disconnected and isolated. They're grieving their senior year or going to prom or any activities, and they're anxious. And when this happens, they're not learning. People cannot think unless they feel safe, and people who feel threatened by what's happening with this pandemic will react with alarm or panic. They will fight, flight, or freeze. So one of the things we have to understand is what are the signs of stress, anxiety, and depression. Feelings of fear, anger, sadness, worry, numbness, or frustration. And one of the things I want to say is we all are experiencing these emotions. Nobody's had experience with a pandemic. So these are normal reactions to this extraordinary event. The concern is when these feelings last longer than 2 weeks and they get in the way of a person's functioning. There may be changes in appetite, eating too much or not eating at all. There's difficulty concentrating and making decisions. There's difficulty sleeping. There's body aches, psychosomatic. So there's headaches and body aches. There is worsening of mental health conditions. So if somebody had a mental health condition prior to the pandemic is adding to it. There could be an increased use of tobacco, alcohol, or other substances. And again, I just want to say it's natural to feel some stress, some anxiety, and worry during the COVID-19 pandemic and with online remote learning. What we want to pay attention is how long this is lasting. Some of the other kind of impact there's a study by Pew Research that says parents are worried about their children falling behind. And there is an abrupt switch to remote learning. And so there was already some gaps with the learning. And now it's increasing the academic gains. And one of the research studies that I found, it said that it is estimated that the average student could begin the next school year having lost as much as a third of the progress they made during the previous year in reading and half of the expected progress in math. Students of color, low-income students, students with special needs, and students who live in rural areas are more vulnerable to these losses, falling behind on an average of 7 to 10 months. It could be up to 10 months for Black students and up to 9 months for Hispanic and Latinx students. And so when we talk about remote learning, there can be multiple challenges. We talked about the Wi-Fi, having the access to the computers. And what's happening now, many schools are trying to get the funding and the resources to provide the supplies that people need. Having space in the home, where can they work when there's multiple people at home? And when we talk about students of color, it's really important that we focus on those disparities and the learning environments and be able to provide the support to the parents and to families. The one study I found said it's too soon to say how long the long-term changes, the long-term online learning will affect students' academic performance, but research from the spring showed students perform better than researchers expected. Some of the other impacts of this remote learning, there's higher dropout rates, there's lack of engagement, turning the videos off and staying quiet. And so we just have to pay attention to how this remote learning is impacting the students. The good news is the shift to remote learning during this COVID pandemic offers opportunities. It offers opportunities to improve the quality of remote learning. Let's provide more training to teachers, some standards of excellence, some competencies. Let's provide teachers with resources that show them how they can make virtual engagement and instruction effective. To fill the widened gaps in a new, creative, and more effective way, including education outside the school. So this is now where the community may have to come in. We might have to have after-school programs that really focus on tutoring and providing that support. Summer school and year-round learning. Summer school programs that work with agencies and youth programs. Churches, tutoring support. Another opportunity is to change the long-term trajectory of education equity. And this is an opportunity for state and local governments can learn from educators and technology companies to consider how to fill the digital divide that disproportionately affects low-income students, students of color, and diverse learners. And this is an opportunity for all of us to think and plan differently to build a system that's responsive to the needs of students. So as I come to an end and we open it up to questions and answers, some additional application and tips and strategies for your toolbox that you can build on with the GRACE is listen to young people and amplify what they say they need, as opposed to what we as adults think they need. Plan with them, not without them. You know the saying, you give a person a fish, they eat for a day. Teach a person to fish, they eat for a lifetime. Include the students in the process. You may have to create new individual and family schedules. Here's the thing, I've often heard people say, I can't wait to go back to how things were before the pandemic. Things are going to be different. Be open to change, be open to coming up with a new way with your schedules, and create individual schedules and create family schedules. Also remember, and this is really key, remember that remote learning does not mimic in-person learning. You may need to communicate with teachers more than usual. Advocate, speak up for your child. You may see cues that the teacher or the school counselor may not see. So it's a collaborative. We all should be working together. If screen time becomes tedious, encourage your student to take physical and mental breaks. Let's get them out. I've been seeing people who have exercise equipment. They're having gym time with their kids and they're spinning on the bikes and walking on the treadmill. So taking breaks. Stay up to date with technology as best that you can. And here's what's important. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to your children. Be kind to your teachers and the other school personnel. And then, just like I said, connect with others and try to use hope-focused, optimistic language, but know that you're not on the island alone. I know we are here to help. St. Paul's Baptist Church is here to help. So any questions that we may not be able to answer, will help to get it answered, but also resources and getting you connected. And so it's really important just to kind of really focus on that social and emotional health and wellness right now. And just know that in the future, there's going to be systems set in place by schools and school districts to decrease the gap in learning that may have been lost, if that's been lost. And I think that's where schools will have to come in and do assessments with the students to determine if there actually has been a loss. But everybody is on a team together and working together. So with that being said, we will now open it up for questions and answers. So feel free to type your questions in the chat boxes if you have any questions. Okay, if there's not any questions, we have time. So if anybody has any questions or comments or concerns. Dr. Carmen, do you have any comments or questions? Maybe there's somebody. How do we make sure our children aren't burned out through online learning? I think that's a question both of us can answer, but I would say ask them. Ask them how they're feeling about online learning. Ask them what might they need, because I can tell you right now, even as me as an adult, I am online all day with clients and teaching and webinars. And so we just have to find ways to give breaks. I know I was talking to a mom. Her child just started crying one day because they did not want to go on to the Zoom. And she says, you know what? Today we're taking a mental health break. We are not going on. We can be absent from this online class. So be flexible as well. Dr. Carmen, do you have any comments about the burned out through online learning?
Sure. I would suggest trying to get to the heart of what it is that they're being burned out by. Is it the workload? Is it the screen time? Is it the amount of independent work that is now required versus, when they were in the building? So I think the more you can pinpoint what exactly it is that they're being frustrated by, or that's causing the burnout, I think you'll be better able to help support them in that. And just as Dr. Tinsley said, ask and pay attention, right? So watch, what they're doing, what they're not doing, what they're avoiding, those types of things, so that you're better able to support them.
Next question is, what do you see may be the long-term impact emotionally and academically? I definitely see that there's going to be some long-term impact, mental health. And so we have to break down the stigmas about mental health and counseling, and be open. Right now, some counselors, professional counselors, psychologists, social workers, outside of the school counselor are seeing students face to face, but also virtually online. So just really helping people to manage their emotions and regulate their emotions, but giving them a space to talk about how they are feeling. And I know academically there's been this concern about long-term impacts. But one of the things that I really saw and that I really know is that once it's safe to return to the school, I think that there's going to be some creative, innovative strategies that are going to be required for students that may have lost ground. So it may be, we already have talked about lengthening the school year. So right now it might be, lengthening the school year, hiring additional tutors. I know AmeriCorps is already planning to bring people in to serve as teachers assistants. So providing school districts with extra supports. and expanding summer school programs. So I truly believe, and this is Taunya Tinsley, we are going to have, there is going to be some ground we have to make up, but I think that we can do it as long as we're creative. We incorporate policy from the local, federal, and state levels as well to provide the support that's needed to the schools.
And I'm going to come actually from a different perspective slightly, in that I have seen a lot of resilience that has been built up in students. And I've also seen students acquire skills specifically in technology. And we know that they were used to like the social media and all of that. But from an educational perspective, I've seen skills developed in students to a level that it would not have been void of the circumstances that we're in. So I think that there is some good that will come out of what we're experiencing right now, emotionally and academically. Now, I absolutely acknowledge the challenges that are happening, but I did not want to gloss over some of the positive things that have come out of what we are experiencing now.
Dr. Carmen, you want to start with the next one? How do you differentiate between wanting to be at home and not wanting to socialize?
Yeah, prior to that, there was a statement that Sister Rita made that she's working with some young college women who are overwhelmed at being at home, and that is a loss that particularly college students who are supposed to be on campus experiencing college life. I have a daughter who is feeling that now. It's a big deal, and so trying to work through that with them as well. So how do you differentiate wanting to be at home versus not wanting to socialize? I mean, that's a personal, as an individual, you have to answer that for yourself. Some people just don't want to be bothered, and the pandemic had nothing to do with it, right? Like that was just, they would rather be home and not dealing with people. And others, for various reasons, perhaps not wanting to be in crowds, not or wanting to be super careful and cautious until, things become safer. So I think it's a series of questions that maybe you ask yourself, like, is it that I just want to be home, or do I not want to be bothered with people right now? And it could be the same answer. It could be yes and yes to both of them, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I think I'll piggyback off of that, and then I'll go back to Miss Rita's question as well. But here's the thing, depending on the age of the student, but from middle school to high school, friends trump. And people just want to socialize with their friends. And so just like some of the survey results said, what they have lost is their friends and their connection of friends. And if I can't connect with my friends, no disrespect, but I don't want to socialize with anyone, and because my friends trump. So they may want to be home and they just don't have that opportunity to socialize with the people that they want to socialize with. And so I know a lot of parents that I work with, they're doing game nights, they've started family dinners again. And here's one of my favorite books that I will tell you all is 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families. And in the book, Stephen Covey talks about begin with the end in mind. Sit down and have weekly family meetings and talk about everyone's goals. And one of the goals is maybe 3 times out of the week, we are going to spend time together to interact and to socialize with each other. But don't make decisions for the students right now, but include them in the process. And Dr. Carmen mentioned about grief. I think it's really important to understand, there's different models of grief. I like the Kubler-Ross model. our students are really kind of shocked and denial. What, are we still not back in school? What, I'm not going to have a prom, a real prom, and I'm not going to have a graduation again. And then there's this anger, being angry at everyone, even though you're not the source and cause of what's going on. That anger is just being lashed out at everyone. Then there's depression, sad, teary-eyed. I just want to isolate myself. I just want to sleep all the time. And then I know for young people that I work with, they do a lot of bargaining. Well, why can't they just let me go out and meet and hang out with one person? They got the COVID test, so why can't I go hang out with this person? Because there's a concern about being in other people's bubbles. And right now, go back to the survey result. COVID is the last thing on the list that's a concern for some young people. Not all, but they're going to bargain and find a way. Can I just go and do this just so I can have some social connection? So that's kind of my comment to that. And then I would also say when people are overwhelmed, take it one step at a time. You know, there's this keep it simple and straightforward. That's KISS. So just break it down into small parts and just focus on one thing at a time, because we don't remember, we got to think about brain and what's happening with the brain. When people are feeling frightened, they can't think, and it's going to just cause some people with being overwhelmed.
So Dr. Tinsley actually answered or addressed partially the next question, right? So how do you differentiate? Oh, no. What are some of the strategies you would use to combat the social isolation? I have only one child. I have an only child. So, you know, Dr. Tinsley talked about, you know, game night, those things. I was just going to say, be intentional and create space for the interactions to happen. So if that is scheduling time, if it is a phone call versus Zoom, if it is a walk, right, around the neighborhood, just get out, fresh air, find ways to connect. So again, be intentional and create space.
And I also want to say this, and this, I'm an adult, but if I am on Zoom all day doing work, and then you ask me to get on Zoom to do some social gathering, I'm not going to want to do it. So change the platform. If Google Classrooms is used strictly for school, just use Google for strictly for school. Try to have some separation so that, okay, maybe we're on Zoom all day, we're going to use Skype for fun, and we're going to have family gatherings using Skype, or we're going to use FaceTime. And, you know, with FaceTime, I have an Apple, so I know some people on Android don't have FaceTime, but whatever the system is. But try to separate and keep platforms strictly for school work, and then platforms that are for social. But I would also say, how can we get creative? Oh, I will tell you, I had a family that did, so, you know, people used to go out and do painting with a twist face to face. They now have it where you can do it via Zoom or Skype, and everybody gets their boards and you're doing it together. So it's really about being creative. And just like Dr. Carmen said, having the opportunities to talk on the phone or, you know, use other forms of communication and technology. Any other questions or comments or concerns?
Sister Rita, what's the second part of your question? She says that they're frustrated by balancing college with work, family interactions. How do you help them find, maybe that's grace? I think it's grace. So if I'm frustrated, I'm balancing work, I'm balancing family, how do I find grace? The first thing I would say is to be intentional about finding 3 things to be grateful for that day, right? So while we can often experience this level of frustration, if we don't stop to take a look at the things that are positive and are happening and are, it might be something that we take for granted, but find 3 things to be grateful for that day. The second thing I would say is to make a connection with others. Oftentimes, particularly when college students are used to being on campus with each other, they may feel, and we talked about this earlier, Dr. Taunya talked about it, about this isolation, this feeling of isolation, staying connected with different people so that they know they're not alone, and can talk through some things, and then create something to look forward to, right? If they're seniors, even though it's maybe not the graduation that they're looking for, they are going to be graduating, right? If they do have the opportunity to go back to campus, that's something to look forward to. So gratefulness, connection, and then find something to look forward to.
And I would add this too. Both Dr. Carmen and I are counselors. So, just allow people to own their feelings. Sometimes they may not even want us to fix it, but just giving them the space to be frustrated, to be angry, giving them the space to own their feelings, and share their feelings without judgment, and receiving unconditional positive regards back. And I think all of us are in this and need a place to be able to just share how you're feeling like you're overwhelmed. I am going to share something. I was talking to Pastor Croft, and he said something that was key. And I think it's really important. I don't think any of us can make any decisions or try to discern things during this pandemic. This is an unusual and unprecedented time. And so, there's a lot of things people are missing and grieving, and we just have to give the space for people to grieve and to feel those emotions, but also being hope focused and having hope for the future that things are going to get better. And like one of my college students said, this isn't forever. One of my parents said, even though I'm over this pandemic, I still don't feel comfortable letting them return back to school. And then one of the teachers said, online learning and working never seems to start or end. So I've had to get better in knowing when to walk away from my computer for a while. This is hard when all my work occurs on my computer. So the word I would use is intentional. Everyone has to be intentional. We have to help young people with being intentional and setting boundaries as well.
Any other questions? So here's a question for you. What is one thing that you would like to keep out of this experience once it's over? What's one positive that has come out of this experience that you would want to keep? For me, so our school, we actually work from home on Wednesdays. And it's been beneficial because we get an opportunity to collaborate with each other while students are learning asynchronously. And I think while not shorting the students from their education, it's time where we can be intentional on a regular basis about how to collaborate for student success. So from an educational standpoint, that's something that I would want to see continue.
For me, I made the transition from being a full-time faculty member to being full-time in my private practice. And one of the things that I have really seen in the past year is people being more open to learning about their mental health, managing their mental health. For me, I have seen more faith-based and churches really trying to bridge the gap between faith and mental health. So for me, the pandemic has opened this door to have some serious conversations, not just only about physical health, but mental health, because they go hand in hand. And so it is my hope that we continue with these conversations even when the pandemic is over.
Sure. Another thing I would say on a more personal level is the level of creativity that has needed to come to the forefront in order to connect, to encourage, to build, right? Just having to be creative and using social media platforms in a way that we hadn't had to use them before. So that's one thing I would say. People are more aware of hand washing. Yes, yes, Lisa.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Self-care, absolutely. Listen, they are mandatory and I demand them unapologetically. I am with you. I am with you. You know, how often it's so important, the level of awareness that has come for the need for self-care and really just being in tune and listening to when you are stressed, when you are frustrated, when you're feeling anxious, and how you deal with that, and being intentional about scheduling time to take care of yourself, whatever that looks like. And self-care should be scheduled the same way, scheduled and maintained and honored the same way that you would schedule a meeting with your boss or a session with a client, right? It should be on your calendar, something that you do because you are that important. And you have to take care of you so that you can help to take care of others. But you got to take care of yourself. So I'm right with you.
A book that I just finished reading, some people, I think I was late to the game with the book, but Shonda Rhimes' book, Year of Yes. Learn to say yes to yourself. It is okay to say no. So if you cannot do something and you need to say no and say yes to yourself. So those self-care days are saying yes to you. But it's an excellent book, Shonda Rhimes, Say Yes to Yourself. Set boundaries. And it'll be something new for people that are not used to you having boundaries, but set boundaries, because if you don't take care of you, who will?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sarita says, I like being in tune with me.
Mm-hmm.
Rolanda says, making a conscious effort to stay in contact with extended family, for sure. I'll tell you something else that I noticed with students, particularly when we came back to the hybrid model. They missed school. They missed being in the building and with each other. And it's not something that they would have necessarily noticed. It just would have been the way it was. Like, you get up and you go to school every day. But being in a situation where that was not the case, it raised the level of awareness. Wow, I like being in that space. I like being around my friends. I like having access to my teachers. I like the learning environment, right? So just realizing, you know, how much you enjoy people in spaces when they're not available to you anymore.
Well, as we come to an end, any final thoughts that you might have, Dr. Carmen?
First of all, I just want to thank you, Dr. Tinsley, for being a wonderful co-host. Thank you to St. Paul's and the Wellness Ministry and the Relaunch Committee for inviting us to participate. Thank you to the participants for coming and sharing and being actively involved. And again, I just want to encourage people to take care of yourself, take care of others, and we will get through it together. Be aware of how you're feeling and the space that you're in. And don't be afraid to ask for help, set boundaries, and get the things that you need. And as educators, as parents, as students, our goal is for students to have what they need so that they can flourish and be productive members of society. So I love you guys, and I wish you the best as we move through this together.
Thank you, Dr. Carmen. Ms. Aquila, do you have any final thoughts? I think you're on mute. There you go.
Dr. Tinsley and Dr. Carmen.
So you can only speak through one device. You have two devices connected. One has to be disconnected or we'll get that feedback the whole time. So you can only be on Zoom in a room on one device. One has to be speaker turned off, microphone turned off, or else we won't be able to hear you.
Yeah.
Ms. Aquila, you may have to start over with what you said because there was some background noise.
What I'd like. Okay, but like, can you hear me now?
There's still a little bit of feedback.
I'll try again. Hold on one moment.
I think you're on two devices.
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there's still some feedback.
I don't know why, but hold on.
While we're waiting for
Dr.
Sister
Tinsley,
Aquila
if you just remove the Aquila link from the meeting, just remove that participant that says Aquila Wells, then the device she's on will stop having the feedback.
I'm gonna try.
So if you hover over her, there should be a way to remove from the meeting, either on the picture or in the participant list.
Hold on, it's not letting me. Let me do it this way.
Well, thank you.
Okay, now you should be good now.
Dr. Tinsley,
Yes.
and Dr. Tinsley and Dr. Carmen, I'd like to thank you for this wonderful presentation and appreciate very much the time that you've given. And I'm sure that there was a lot of information, the strategies that you shared with us today will be utilized. So again, thank you for doing this wonderful town hall for us, hoping that we both learn.
Thank you, Ms. Aquila, and thank you, Dr. Carmen. I really enjoyed working with you from the very beginning. I really appreciate you, Ms. Aquila, with asking me and Dr. Reeder, asking Dr. Carmen. This was a great team together. And my last thoughts, I just want to say, try to stay in the here and now. Try to just be mindful of the present time, because if you stay focused on the past and what it used to be like, that's going to increase levels of depression. If you focus so much on the future and what is this going to mean for learning and what is this going to mean for school, it's going to increase anxiety. We are going to have to trust the process. with the policymakers, local, federal, and state. Trust the school districts to come up with plans and the teachers. And when we trust the process isn't always going to be pretty, but don't get so focused on what's going to happen a year from now, 2 years from now, and try to be in the here and now. Thank you very much for being here this evening. Greatly appreciate it. I also want to thank Reverend Carlton, Eden Carlton, for all of her help and support with this presentation this evening. I'm grateful for her as well. Thank you all for participating.
And don't forget to end Facebook Live.